Welcome to the Gallery Bar Booking Games here in Atlantic City at Ocean Casino Resort. My name is Mark Farzetta, along with Seth Joyner and Derek Gunn, ahead of Eagles-Giants divisional round of the playoffs. A 14-3 season culminates to this at this point after a first-round bye for the number one seeded Philadelphia Eagles. And gentlemen, the electricity here at Ocean Casino is nothing short of incredible. Leaving the Wells Fargo Center earlier today, where the Philadelphia Wings lacrosse team played, in front of a sold-out lower bowl with Eagles fans buying tickets to simply get into the parking lot and partake in a little box lacrosse as well. But whatever gets the job done to get the fans all rallied and ready to go for Eagles-Giants tonight. Fellas, I know they always say when you look at a game like this, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. But I say those first 2 games were very different than what we saw in the first go of it. So, Gunnar, let's start it off with people are talking about the most. We're talking about Lane Johnson and Jalen Hurts. What health-wise, how are they looking going into today's game?
Well, first of all, Mark, let me say this. We've been coming here for now 18 weeks. This place is more jammed than at any other time that I've been here. You have a lot of Giants fans here. You have a lot of Eagles fans here. And you have a lot of fans here to see the UFC, the big UFC card tonight. With the mixture of Giants and Eagles fans, you may get your own UFC card right here at Ocean Casino tonight.
Well, we're not rooting for that.
But we're not rooting for that. But to specifically answer your question, first of all, in the general terms, both of them are good enough to go. Now, specifically, Jalen Hurts built up gradually on his throws. To the point by Thursday, we heard Devontae Smith said he's slinging the ball all over the place, which tells me he's making all the necessary throws that he has to make them. Is he making them without pain and discomfort? That's what we don't know, because this Eagles team is so well at guarding information like that. But if you're good enough to get out on that field, you're good enough to play. As for Lane Johnson, I've said it on many platforms, Lane Johnson is one of the toughest dudes you will ever meet in the National Football League. Now, we know he's going to have surgery at the conclusion of this season. We also know there's going to be some discomfort there. But Lane Johnson at 85% is better than any other option they have on their right side. If Lane has to come out of this game, that's not a good thing. But I'm betting my money. Oh, we're in a casino, by the way. I'm betting my money that Lane Johnson finishes what he starts tonight.
Way to get that plug in there.
You like that?
That's very nice.
You like that? Okay.
Well, you're an old pro right there.
Yeah.
Seth, when we spoke about these two teams, when we spoke about the Giants earlier in the year, and we spoke about the Cowboys, you asked a question of Gunnar and I saying, which of those teams do you respect the most? Which team are you putting the most attention to? And I said the Cowboys. You, sir, like this New York Giants football team. Did they play to the potential you saw earlier in the season against the Vikings last week?
Yeah, and somebody sitting right next to me kind of laughed at me, you know, and Mike Missinelli laughed at me when I said so. Listen, after that first game, when the Giants won their first game that they had of the season, and it came down to the last play of the game, and Brian Daboll called timeout, and he brought his whole team over. He was like, hey, do you guys want to go for the tie? I want to go for the win. What do you want to do? The whole team said, let's go for the win. That shifted the dynamic of this football team right then and there. And in my opinion, you know, it was a major, major deal for how this team has advanced. They started off hot. They played well. They hit a little lull. Then they kind of tipped back up, you know, again. And to be honest with you, you know, they kind of limped and fell into the playoffs. Nothing wrong with that, because it's all about getting there and getting in. Played against a Minnesota Viking team, which quite frankly, I didn't think really was the number 3 seed in the NFC. But they proved that they belong by beating the number 3 team in the NFC. Now, you come into the Philadelphia Eagles, and the question is, can a team win 3 times in a year? It's going to be a tough game because of the familiarity of these two teams. But at the end of the day, the Philadelphia Eagles are just a superior football team from top to bottom when you look at this roster. You're going to get Jalen Hurts back 100%. This is a game I feel like you have to unleash him. You cannot protect him because there are no tomorrows in this situation. And if they get back to playing the way that they played, you know, when they were, you know, 13-1 before they hit that little lull at the end, I don't see how the Giants win this football game.
I want to talk about a key matchup, but ahead of doing that, I do want to tell the fine people watching on YouTube and the 6 ABC channel as well that when you look at today's broadcast, we have a whole bunch of entertainment set up for you. Not only do we have the fine analysis of these gentlemen, but also we'll be going to Lincoln Financial Field twice, once in the booth with our friend, NFL insider John McMullen in the press box, and then on the field with Adam Malamut, who will be walking us through everything going on the field. So we'll have a field report, and we'll go into the tailgate. Gunnar, you and I spoke to Joe Messa of Messa & Associates earlier in the week. He was talking about making pizzas for his tailgaters. He was talking about grilling. I think I'll be evaluating the pizza, and you'll be evaluating the grilling in that situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he'll be joining us later to give us a little bit of a vibe. Like I said, I was down there. I came down here today from the Wells Fargo Center, from Lincoln Financial Field parking lot, and it was already buzzing. People throwing the football around, people having the grills going. This Eagles fan base is ready for the Giants to have to game plan against them, not just the Eagles on the field. Now, to talk a little bit more about Lane Johnson and what we could expect from the Eagles, all-pro right tackle. Seth, if you're Wink Martindale in this situation, you have to be thinking right out of the gate, you're not only going to be testing Lane Johnson, but in doing so, you're also going to be testing Jalen Hurts, trying to get him off his mark as well. If you're Wink Martindale, how are you attacking Lane Johnson today?
Well, hey, listen, I'm curious to see because, you know, we saw an evolved Wink Martindale last week against the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't come after that team the way he normally would. I mean, he dialed it back. It certainly wasn't, 40%, 42, 43%, blitz rate. They played a little more man-to-man. They played a little more zone. They kind of mixed it up. He was less aggressive. And I wonder if that's really going to be his game plan going into this week against Jalen Hurts. The first thing, any defensive coordinator, the first thing they want to do is they want to be able to shut down the run. And if they can shut down the run and stymie the running game, then they're going to be in a position where they can kind of dictate in the passing game how they want to attack you. The crazy thing is the Philadelphia Eagles throw caution to the wind when it comes to evaluating the weaknesses and attacking the weaknesses. And it's hard to argue, when you're 14-3 and you're the number 1 seed, but they do. A team that's weak against the run versus a team that's stronger against the pass, they will come out throwing against a team's strength, or they'll come out attacking. Their game plan is to attack another team's strength rather than just debilitating their weakness, which allows them to now chip away at a team's strength. So it's going to be really interesting. You talk about Lane Johnson. I don't think that they have the type of pass rusher on that team, even though you have Kayvon Thibodeau. I think those two guys in the middle create more of a headache for this offense and this offensive line than does anyone that they have on the outside. So my focus will be, what are they going to do with Dexter Lawrence? What are they going to do, with Sheldon Williams? What are you going to do with those two guys? I'm not worried about Lane Johnson. I just want I want the Eagles to get to a point at halftime where this game is signed, sealed, and delivered. Pull Lane Johnson out, put Jack Driscoll back in the game. Hopefully get to a point where you can put Gardner Minshew back in the game, and let's just ride this thing out and get Lane Johnson to health and safety, and get Jalen Hurts to health and safety, and look forward to next week.
Gunnar, I feel like this is 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago when we were talking about this. Maybe get Jalen Hurts out of the second half in Week 18 against the Giants, but now here we are in the divisional round of the playoffs, and we're talking about possibly being able to give some starters a break later in this game. Look, let's jump right to it if we're going to go there, but when you look at it like that, will the Eagles control the football and control this game as much as that to give Jalen Hurts a rest at all in the second half?
You know what? When you talk about football in general and then you enhance it by talking about playoff football, you always expect the unexpected. I don't know. Did you think a New Orleans Saints team could control the clock for 37 minutes against an Eagles defense? I did not. If I'm the Eagles, I'm going to get as many points on the board as early as I can to take any type of fight mentally, psychologically, physically that you can out of these New York Giants. Because as we know, if you let an inferior opponent hang around in the fourth quarter, crazy things start to happen. Now, like Seth said, when you look at what the Giants did, and Wink Martindale in particular last week against the Vikings, here's a Giants defense that blitzes over 42% of the time, but they called off the dogs against the Vikings and they dropped more people in coverage. Why? Well, the first time the Eagles played them, They didn't have Adoree Jackson. They didn't have Xavier McKinney. They didn't have Leonard Williams. And Dexter Lawrence is like on a mission right now. He's a man possessed. When you put Leonard Williams back in there with Dexter Lawrence, what you have is a two-man defensive front that is the equivalent of what Washington threw at the Eagles that gave the Eagles problems in their run game. Now, still, we can say all that, and you have to top it off by saying, in no way, shape, or form do the New York Giants have anywhere near the talent or depth that this Eagles roster does. But we can talk about the game all day. You got to play the game between the stripes.
Certainly, and you are watching The Road to Glendale here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel at 6abc.com, brought to you by Malamut Law as well as Mesa Law and Associates. A lot of people will talk about that idea of being a little bit overconfident going up against this Giants team, being that you did beat them twice during the regular season, and they're favored by 8 points by most books. Looking into today's game, they're favored by 8 points right there. So, Seth, as a football player, how do you not overlook the opponent in front of you? I understand that was never a problem for you, but was it ever a problem with anyone in the locker room as you were playing?
No, I don't think so. And you know, let me preface what I said with that's how I feel. Okay, as a football team, there's no way in the world you can tell me that those Philadelphia Eagles that are prepping for this game, in another, 3 or 4 hours, you can't tell me that that's their mindset. They're approaching it from the proper perspective. I'm just talking about what it is that I expect for this football team to be able to do to the Giants. I mean, you don't look past, any opponent. It is tough because you've already played them twice and you got to play them the third time. But let's also be honest, okay? The New York Giants haven't won a game in Lincoln Financial Field in 9 tries, okay? I was at Brian Westbrook yesterday, and I looked at him. I said, guess what, Brian? I said, we own their asses. Y'all own their asses, and I expect for this team to own their asses too. I mean, that's just the expectation. Now, are there some keys? Absolutely. You got to get Saquon Barkley under control because even though he was plus 50 rushing, plus 50 catching last week, which aren't hugely dynamic numbers, but he gave Daniel Jones just enough to keep the defenses honest. And he was an outlet for him in situations where what Daniel Jones saw down the field wasn't there. He was always there to drop it off. He had 5 catches for, I think, 56 yards. The next thing is you got to keep Daniel Jones in the pocket. The Eagles are notorious for this. This wild pass rush where you're just going hair on fire. Listen, the guy is a hell of an athlete, okay? And he struggles a lot more when you make him operate from the pocket than when you let him get outside of the pocket. He converted 7 first downs last week against Minnesota, rushing the football. He rushed for 70 yards on top of 300 yards passing. So when you look at those things, the Eagles have got to be very, very disciplined in how they pass rush him today. They know they can get to him. But you can't be reckless and you can't be selfish, in your pass rushing where you, forget your responsibility and lane integrity and things like that puts the whole team at risk, especially in times, when the Eagles have got to go play some man-to-man. When they have to get man-to-man, they've got to be ultra disciplined in how they rush Daniel Jones.
So last week when we saw Daniel Jones played one of the best games of his career, and obviously it mattered most in his first playoff game, and the Giants' first playoff game since 2016. Daniel Jones, of course, had 300-plus yards in throwing the football. Then he had 78 yards on the ground, actually led the team in rushing, despite the fact that Saquon Barkley had over 100 yards in total offense and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. So by far, Daniel Jones turned out being the star of the show for the New York Giants offense. When it comes to containing him in this game, Gunner, how do you think a guy like Jonathan Gannon goes about trying to contain one of the best running backs in the game and one of the quarterbacks that's coming off his best game in his career?
Well, like Seth said, it's all about gap discipline. You're so used to pursuing a quarterback at certain angles and just trying to get to him. Daniel Jones is smart enough in this Brian Daboll offense to know if he can feel that pressure, all he has to do is step up and there will be a lane there. And that's when he's trouble because you don't know if he's going to take off and run or if he's going to stay back behind that line of scrimmage and dump a pass off to his tight end, Bellinger, or to one of his wide receivers. You look at a Saquon Barkley. We know he's a phenomenal running back, well over 1,000 yards. Now, Seth talked about the dynamic of Saquon the runner. To me, Saquon the pass catcher is more dangerous. I'm more worried about Saquon catching the ball in open space and who's going to try to match up against him to try to negate him from doing that, more so than I am with him running the football. I believe this Eagles defensive front can more than do the job of keeping Saquon in the corral and not letting him bust one off like he did against Minnesota's porous defense. But when he starts floating out of that backfield across the middle, that's, to me, is when Saquon's the most dangerous.
Certainly, and one of the other things that I do give attention to in this game, of course, is that the scariest game of the year, probably for the Eagles, was that game against the Washington Commanders, where they couldn't hold on to the football, and the Commanders came out and basically drew up the blueprint that if you were going to try to give the Eagles a run for their money, the only way to do it is to keep Jalen Hurts and this offense off the field. Prevent them by scoring, by not allowing them the opportunities to score. The Giants, with this running game, with the ability to extend plays like Daniel Jones can, the ability to scramble for first downs the way Daniel Jones can, and overall what Saquon Barkley brings to the field will allow the Giants in a couple instances, I think, in this game to attempt to control the clock. So will that be a focus for the Giants in their game plan going up against the Eagles today, Seth?
Well, listen, they know how explosive our offense is. So when you consider how explosive our offense is, it just may be one of those situations where they may have to try to keep pace with us. It's almost like, when you watch the Kansas City Chiefs play, you know that they have the potential to score every single possession. And if they're scoring every single possession, that puts added pressure on you to score as well. Now, that might work early in the game, but if the Eagles offense gets on track early and they score the first 2 or 3 possessions of the game, and the Eagles defense forces them, to try to keep pace, then you're going to get into a situation where, they're going to be forced to open the offense up. They're going to be forced to just straight drop back with Daniel Jones. So they're not going to be able to control tempo, have ball control, and all those types of things. The game itself will kind of dictate that. There's always a situation where you want to do something, but the optics of the game and how the game actually unfolds is really what dictates and what you're able to do. And that's where great coaches come in. The coaches who have the ability to say, you know what, this is our game plan, but guess what, it ain't working. Like against the New Orleans Saints. We come out, pass. 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. End of the half. 5 possessions, 2 first downs. Okay? See, to me, after the first 3 and out, I'm looking at what do we have to adjust, because we can't keep doing things the way we want to do them, or we can't keep living by this same game plan and it's not working. And I get it. It's funny because B. West and I had this conversation yesterday. I asked him the same question, and he said, listen, man, sometimes when the game plan ain't working, all it takes is 1 or 2 guys on the offense not doing what it is that he's supposed to do. So in the coach's mind, it's like, if we just do our jobs, then guess what? The game plan will work.
Yeah.
But if it's not working at some point in time, you as a play caller, you have to make the adjustment. And that's what the Eagles want to force them to have to do, is not to allow them to execute their game plan, but for us to execute ours to perfection, or as close to perfection as we can, and force them to adjust to what we're doing.
If fans, I think, are being real at this point in the season, with the regular season being wrapped up, Jalen Hurts does not look like the favorite to win the MVP. But I believe what he would take, and most Eagles players would take over somebody winning an MVP on the team, is a couple of playoff wins and obviously hoisting a Lombardi trophy and providing us with a fine parade down Broad Street. So looking into this game, Gunnar, when you talk about a guy like Jalen Hurts, for instance, and the maturation process we've watched throughout this season, what do you think is going through his mind right now in the Eagles locker room at Lincoln Financial Field ahead of what many are expecting and predicting and expecting to be his first playoff win?
Make the plays that I'm asked to make, minimize the mistakes to generate more turnover for the opposition. Go down the field, do what I'm called to do. Let everybody know, especially early on, that Jalen Hurts is back. Running the RPOs, running the quarterback calls that they call, making the throws in the slot, finding this guy, A.J. Brown, time and time again, going deep when he gets the shot, to let everybody know that shoulder's not going to be a problem in this game tonight. If he does that right out of the bat, that's a psychological win for this Eagles team.
Right on that note, though, for a second, when we talk about his shoulder, we saw in that last game of the season against the Giants, he was kind of, I would say, timid, hesitant would probably be a better word for it, to run, and rightfully so. I think we were all rooting for him to slide if he ever looked like he was going to run. There were a couple of different situations where we saw him do just that. But as the game went on, in the second half, he would try to get that extra yard. He would try to run for that first down. He was feeling more confident as the game went on. Now we're a couple of weeks removed. We're a couple of practices removed. How confident do you think he will be in his body health-wise?
Oh, I think he's had additional time to get ready for this. He's gone through every test you can possibly go through in practice. He's taken hits on in his practice. You know, they go through hitting drills and stuff like that. I think his mind is exactly where it needs to be. You go back to that Giants game, you also notice they called it very vanilla offense. And at times, how many times did he float outside the pocket and you're thinking he's going to turn up and run the football, and if he couldn't find anybody open, basically he threw it out of bounds. You had the Eagles frontliners playing the JV squad for the Giants. The Eagles knew there was no way they were going to lose that game against the Giants backups, okay? I'm sure the coaching staff told him, don't take any unnecessary risk. Do what you have to do. Get down quicker than you normally get down. Throw it away. We just want this game to be important enough for us to secure that #1 spot. Let's get you some more rest, some more treatment, and now focus on the task at hand.
Seth, the last time we talked about Jalen Hurts' shoulder, you mentioned there's two different types of ways to get over injuries. One, the physical way, where, yes, you are healthy. The other is the mental way, trusting that you're healthy and you're not going to aggravate anything. Where do you think Jalen Hurts is today going into the game?
I think he's 100%. I can't speak to how hurt he actually was, but when I hear him talk, he doesn't sound like he's as concerned as the coaching staff or the organization is, and I get that, because as a player, you know, if you're going to play, if you're going to get out there, then your mentality has to be, you know, I'm either somewhat 100% or I'm going to do whatever's necessary for me to get it done. I just don't think that, you know, he's the type of player. I think I agree with Derek that, you know, week 18, he was instructed to not take any hits whatsoever, okay? He was instructed to get what you could get and get down, and I want you to get down before the possibility of contact even comes. That's all fine and dandy, because there was an opportunity to play another game this weekend. But there is no other game next weekend if you don't win the game this weekend. So I think he's full go. I think you unleash him 100%. I don't think there's any hindrances to his game, and I don't think that even if the coaches put him out there and said, hey, do this, this, and this, I don't think that, because he's a competitor, and he knows that in order for this offense to work efficiently, in order for them to have success and win this football game tonight, that he's going to have to be the Jalen Hurts, you know, that he was the MVP leading candidate before he got injured.
Please tell us, what can happen during a bye week? I understand it depends on the severity of the injury, but when you're talking about trying to get fresh, or you're talking about just trying to get over maybe that mental hurdle, what can happen during a full week off?
Well, confidence can soar. I mean, you know, listen, an old coach used to tell me every single day we walk out on the field, he said, all right, what's the plan today? You know, you're getting better, you're getting worse. Because nobody stays the same. Every single day, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. All right, so with a week off, we haven't heard anything about any setbacks, so he's got to be getting better. The shoulder's got to be getting stronger. The arm's got to be feeling better when he's throwing the ball. And in turn, what happens is your confidence begins to skyrocket. And he'll get to a point where he's like, man, I feel like my old self again. And once psychologically and confidently he gets back to that level, oh, look out. Look out. Now we got, like I said, the week 14, week 15, you know, MVP leading candidate just running our offense and getting us where we need to go.
I said earlier in the week when it was Gunner, me, and Mike Missinelli that when it came to what were we expecting from Jalen Hurts in this game, I am expecting the MVP version of Jalen Hurts. If he could go out and play like that, even if it was hesitant, even if it was to be safe, I think we're going to get an even better version of Jalen Hurts today. And I think that better version is MVP.
I had a couple of different interviews and conversations this week, and a lot of people are concerned with how the Eagles played, you know, the last 3 or 4 games of the season. Just quickly, the Dallas Cowboys look horrible and went into Tampa Bay and completely took them apart. Now, if the Dallas Cowboys can right their ship after looking as bad as they looked at the end of the year, and they weren't looking bad because of injuries, they were just playing bad. Certainly the Eagles, once they get Jalen Hurts back 100%, I expect for them to be flying high tonight in all phases of the game.
I think Gunnar and I would both agree with you on that. We got the road to Glendale continuing here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, as well as 6abc.com, brought to you by Malamut Law and Mesa Law and Associates. When we return, we'll talk to our friend John McMullen from Lincoln Financial Field for his break.